All right, welcome everyone. This week is Computer Science Education Week. Now, while we aren't covering computer science today, we are all on computers and we're discussing science while getting educated. All right, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but what's not a stretch is the life safety features of residential fire sprinkler systems. And they do more than that. They actually save significant water and building materials. And today, we're going to discuss how you can promote the sustainability of your homes with fire sprinkler systems and how different systems offer benefits for builders, installers, and the end user. And here to lead us through that discussion is Eric Scari, Innovation Manager for Intelligent Water at Uponor. Now, some of you might remember him from his appearance on this webinar series about 3 months ago, but in case you aren't familiar with his background, Eric has been in the residential plumbing and fire safety industries for 18 years with an emphasis in product marketing, product engineering, and project management. As a volunteer firefighter and a professional member of various fire protection associations, he is passionate about water conservation and personal protection. Today's webinar is brought to you by Uponor. Uponor is a global pioneer in innovative PEX piping solutions for flawless plumbing, heating, and cooling systems that enrich the lives of millions worldwide. The company is driving progress with intelligent solutions that support high-performing, smart building practices while advancing the industry through innovation, education, and advocacy. Now, if you have any questions during the course of today's presentation, you can submit those for our guest by using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel, which is probably located on the right side of your screen. I'll review those questions and pose them to Eric during the Q&A time set aside after his presentation. Eric, I'm glad you could join us today.
Thank you, Mike. This should be the biggest no-brainer in history. People are dying in their homes, and in most areas of the country, we haven't put the solution in place. We're also significantly damaging the planet. We're using almost 10 times more water than we should, and we're allowing a tremendous amount of air pollution when we don't have to. Today, I'll explain how residential fire sprinkler systems can eliminate that waste and environmental damage. A couple of months ago, I presented a Green Builder webinar on sustainable protection with smart leak detection systems for the home, which you can access from the Green Builder video website. I accused us all of not paying attention. I wasn't accusing you of multitasking or tuning me out, which I hope you don't do today. I was trying to get us all to start paying attention to the severity of our water scarcity crisis. By the way, if you are paying really close attention, you'll have noticed that when I presented that webinar, my title was Innovation Manager, as Mike said, for our Intelligent Water business. And as of last week, I'm now the Codes Manager for Uponor's North American operations. So for those that noticed that, thanks for paying attention. In that webinar, I shared lots of examples showing why water conservation efforts are so critically important, especially in the Southwest US and other areas facing severe water issues. I shared statistics about water utilities and their concern about the future water supply. I also shared lots of statistics about how much water is wasted and showed how leak detection devices like the FIN Plus, Smart Water Assisted Plus Shutoff, can make a difference. I showed how much water can be wasted from even a small drip leak from a faucet and highlighted the fact that water damage is the second most common homeowner's insurance claim. Fortunately, home fires don't occur as often as water leaks. But if we look at insurance claims from a dollar value standpoint, the most costly claims are due to fires. What that tells us is that fires are devastating. And I'm hoping this isn't really breaking news and that everybody already takes precautions to prevent fires in your own homes. And we need to be especially mindful of that during this holiday decorating season. This is a picture that I captured from a video that was conducted during a live Christmas tree burn test that the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission has done. And since I have you as a captive audience, I have to get this public service announcement in. If you have a live Christmas tree in your home, please keep it watered. Flashover occurred on this live Christmas tree fire burn in less than 1 minute, just shortly after this screenshot of the video. So please remember to water your tree every day. And by the way, this test was also conducted on a well-watered tree, and it burned much more slowly. So please, when it comes to water conservation efforts, this isn't the area that you should focus. As you may have noted from my bio, I'm a volunteer firefighter in my hometown. Our mission is to serve the community through the protection of lives and property by providing public safety education, like that public service announcement I just gave, and professional emergency response. Right now, we have a campaign going to keep the wreath red. We've hung wreaths on all of our fire stations, and they started out with all red bulbs. We're slowly replacing them with white ones for every fire that occurs during this holiday decorating season. I urge you to consider using battery-operated candles. Make sure you're keeping decorations away from space heaters, and be careful using extension cords. So far, we've got 3 white bulbs on our wreath, and we're really hoping there aren't any more. So please do everything you can so the wreath stays red in your community too. Through my various roles at Uponor, including my time as the fire sprinkler product manager, I've had the honor to serve on the NFPA Technical Committee for Residential Fire Sprinklers, which includes NFPA 13D, the standard that defines installation rules for 1- and 2-family dwellings for fire sprinkler systems. The purpose of this standard is to provide protection against injury and life loss by preventing flashover, so occupants can escape or be evacuated. This technical committee makes difficult decisions with every revision to balance life safety and expected installation costs. Fortunately, fire sprinklers are extraordinarily effective at controlling and extinguishing fires before they grow and reach flashover conditions. So there are ways to limit the complexity of sprinkler system designs and limit the number of sprinklers that are required. The International Code Council recognizes this, and in every edition of the International Residential Code since 2009, fire sprinklers have been required in all new homes. Unfortunately, in my opinion, most states have removed the sprinkler requirement when adopting this model code. So I've mentioned flashover a couple of times. Flashover is the point where basically everything in the room has reached its ignition temperature and bursts into flame. Nothing survives flashover because temperatures are typically well over 1,000 degrees. Now, most of us learned about the fire triangle early on in life, but there's really a 4th component, the sustained chemical reaction that allows fires to continue to burn and grow in size. Fire sprinklers can prevent flashover from occurring by quickly cooling the fire and disrupting that chemical reaction. By spraying water on the fire when it's small, a single fire sprinkler can contain the growth and will usually extinguish a residential fire. I want to share a couple of graphics that the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition has developed that show a timeline of fire growth with and without sprinklers. Now, a general rule of thumb is that a fire will double in size every 30 seconds, often resulting in flashover in as little as 3 minutes. There are several things to note with this graphic that are very troublesome to firefighters, but the most alarming is that flashover can often occur even before we arrive on scene. That means the fire has very likely grown beyond the room of origin and may have blocked other ways out of the house, making it very difficult to escape the home, even if the smoke alarm functioned properly and alerted the occupants. That usually occurs in a minute or less, alerting the occupants that there's a problem in the home. By the time they alert emergency services, call 911 and report the fire service responds, the fire truck arrives, establishes water supply. It can often be 7 to 10 minutes before there's active fire suppression operations on scene. When fire sprinklers are present, the closest sprinkler acts quickly, without human intervention, to control and minimize the fire growth, and in most cases, actually extinguish the fire. Then, once the fire department arrives, their job is a lot easier, basically confirming that the fire has been extinguished. This significantly reduces the risk of injury that firefighters face when working at the fire. I'll share more information from the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition later, as they are a great resource for fire sprinkler information, not only for homeowners and the fire service, but for builders, realtors, developers, and those responsible for community risk reduction. As a firefighter, and due to my roles here at Uponor, I've become a fire sprinkler advocate. And one of the areas that a fire sprinkler advocate always needs to address are the myths that surround fire sprinklers. Many people believe that smoke alarms are all they need to stay safe in their homes, and also believe that new homes are safer than old homes. The truth is, smoke alarms just aren't enough anymore. Being alerted by a smoke detector is certainly very important. And although there may be fewer fires nowadays, when they do occur, they burn faster and produce more toxic smoke than in the past. This limits the amount of time that homeowners have to evacuate the home. Furnishings today predominantly use synthetic materials that cause fires to burn much hotter and grow more quickly. And with most homes being constructed with strong but lightweight materials such as engineered wood I-beams and gusset plate trusses, structural collapse can occur in less than 10 minutes. This is another issue that is especially worrisome to firefighters. Remember, the average response time for firefighters to arrive and begin suppression operations is between 7 and 10 minutes, just as the floors and roofs are approaching their structural limits. For those that believe the myths, fire sprinklers are the solution. These are also some pretty commonly held myths, and we have Hollywood to thank for these misbeliefs. I'm sure it's not intentional or malicious, but continuing to portray fire sprinkler systems being activated by smoke or a pull station reinforces the misconception of how sprinklers operate. Fire sprinklers are heat activated, and although they are connected through the piping system, they are individually activated. Most home fire sprinklers are hidden behind a flat cover plate on the ceiling, which also releases at a predefined temperature, usually around 135 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature reaches about 155 to 165 degrees, a fusible link or glass bulb will break or release, allowing about 10 to 13 gallons of water to spray directly on the fire. If we're worried about damage, the destruction caused by fire and firefighters with hoses, axes, haligans, and pike poles, that damage will be considerably worse than a little bit of water damage. Again, some information from the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. They developed a controlled burn with a side-by-side comparison of identical homes with and without sprinklers. Just like with that Christmas tree burn, this test again showed the room of origin becoming untenable, unlivable, unsurvivable in less than a minute without fire sprinklers. This is the picture of that room after the fire with the fire sprinkler operating and controlling it. Yes, it's a little bit wet, but as they say, you can always dry things out, but you can never unburn them. This is that same room with the aftermath in the home without fire sprinklers. Again, as I mentioned, this room reached flashover in just over 1 minute, and the toxic smoke and gases and heat would probably have made the whole home untenable well before the fire department arrived. There are a multitude of these studies, tests, and reports and case studies that show the effectiveness of fire sprinklers. The Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition has compiled simple, direct information to help builders understand what impact sprinklers have, ways to educate homeowners, and how to implement fire sprinklers in the homes you build. Upanor's got a staff of designers on hand that can help with the design of a home, of the fire sprinkler system for a home, and can even assist with making modifications to your layout to minimize the impact of the fire sprinkler system. The Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition has information showing that buyers are asking for fire sprinklers in their new homes, and that sprinklered homes are growing in popularity. According to a Harris poll conducted on behalf of the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, 78% of U.S. homeowners say home fire sprinklers provide the ultimate protection for residents, and 74% say they'd be more likely to buy a home with fire sprinklers than one without. Now that we know how fire sprinklers work, how effective they are, and hopefully recognize their value, let's talk about how they protect our planet and our people. The statistics I'm about to share are astounding. And again, it's really a mystery to me why fire sprinklers aren't being included in more single-family homes. A study conducted by FM Global and HFSC investigated the environmental impact of burning two identical structures, one with sprinklers and one without. The study concluded that a sprinklered home can reduce water used to fight a fire by upwards of 90%. This isn't really very surprising when you consider that the target flow rate for a typical firefighting hand line, in our department, these are 1 3/4 inch diameter hoses, is 160 gallons per minute. Remember that graphic from the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition earlier? If the fire had been allowed to grow unchecked, it can double in size every 30 seconds, requiring more fire suppression activities in a much larger area. In the fire service, one of our mantras is big fire equals big water. Because today's fires are often bigger and faster moving, more and more departments are deploying larger hose lines at the beginning of firefighting operations. For us, that means deploying a 2.5 inch hose line that can flow 300 gallons or more per minute. This helps control those big fires with that big water. Fire sprinklers, on the other hand, typically flow around 13 gallons per minute from a single sprinkler. It's kind of the reverse thinking. Catch it when it's small, and you only need a little water. And since so much less water is used to fight a fire with fire sprinklers, the amount of polluted water that runs off, often into storm drains and eventually into streams and lakes, is significantly reduced. Without sprinklers, those fast-burning synthetic materials and the toxins they produce are being washed away with the thousands and thousands of gallons of water that firefighters are pouring into homes. All of that black smoke polluting our air contains carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. These greenhouse gases are reduced by 97.8% when fire sprinklers are present, according to the FM Global report. Additional analysis of the air emissions indicated some of the toxic chemicals that were released into the air at rates of 100 times or more than when fire sprinklers were present. And all of that fire damage is reduced by about 97% when sprinklers are present. That burned, charred, and smoke damaged material all ends up in a landfill. Not to mention all the materials that are required to rebuild the home. Again, if fire sprinklers are present, the fire is typically contained to a very small area of origin, so much less of the home will be damaged and usually can just be dried out. Even if a fire doesn't result in the complete destruction like this picture, firefighters will cause quite a bit of damage ourselves in an effort to assure there isn't a rekindle. The last thing we want is our pagers to go off for a home that we just thought we'd put a fire out in. All of that destroyed material is damaging our planet. And when it comes to people, in 2018, there were over 2,700 fire deaths due to home fires. If fire sprinklers are present, the risk of dying in a home fire decreases by 80% as well. The more quickly we start including fire sprinklers in all new homes, the faster this will improve. This is the number of firefighter injuries that occurred at fireground operations in 2018. The average firefighter injury rate when fire sprinklers were present was reduced by nearly 80%. Firefighters have a stake in this game too, and that's why we're often pushing for residential fire sprinklers to be included in new homes. And one of the biggest risks for firefighters and homeowners as well was studied by Underwriter Laboratories in a test comparing traditional wood materials found in older homes and lightweight construction. The UL report, Structural Stability of Engineered Lumber in Fire Conditions, indicated that the lightweight construction assembly collapsed in 6 minutes versus the 18.5 minutes it took for what they refer to as legacy materials. The National Research Council in Canada also conducted the impacts of unprotected floor assemblies in fire situations. In their research, NRC concluded that lightweight assemblies reach structural failure 35 to 60% faster than solid wood assemblies. And a 2012 report from the National Fire Protection Research Foundation also underscored the danger of engineered lumber during a fire, labeling its rapid structural failure under fire conditions a high level of concern. At Uponor, we always try to think of sustainability in broader terms than just being environmentally conscious. Sustaining and improving people's lives is a critical component of our sustainability equation. Installing fire sprinklers to keep people safe from injury and death due to fires clearly contributes to a sustainable solution. But probably the sustainability piece that people think is missing with fire sprinklers is that third circle: profit. Here's myth number 5. Installing fire sprinkler systems in new homes is too costly. Certainly, there is a cost to incorporate this life-saving technology into your new homes, but there are some unique ways to approach this that can make a significant difference. I showed you survey results a little bit ago indicating potential home buyers see value and would be more likely to purchase a home with fire sprinklers than without. Demand exists, but many times homeowners aren't aware that fire sprinklers might even have been available as an option. In addition to the demand, which usually means more revenue, there are many potential trade-ups that may be available when fire sprinklers are included in all new homes in a new development. The potential trade-ups that may be available if all new homes in a development have fire sprinklers may include the permitting of additional units by increasing the density through smaller setbacks and offsets. Other trade-ups may be available as well. In some cases, fire protection stakeholders, mainly the fire service, may even allow the elimination of basement egress windows, highlighting just how much they value and trust the protection provided by fire sprinklers. And for developers, hydrant spacing may be increased. Single access to developments may be allowed, and narrower roads can all be potential trade-ups that significantly reduce costs for that development. But it's not just firefighters, homeowners, builders, and developers that benefit from wide-scale fire sprinkler installations. Communities can benefit from an increased tax base when new developments and additions are constructed. But providing adequate fire protection always needs to be considered. When those new developments incorporate fire sprinklers, cities can often delay expansion of their fire departments, which can literally save millions of dollars. The land, station construction, new trucks, and hiring new firefighters, even if they're volunteers, can be a very expensive obstacle to growth in many communities. A new ladder truck alone can easily cost $750,000 or more. Installing fire sprinklers in your homes really should be a no-brainer. Thanks so much for joining today. To learn more about installing fire sprinklers in your homes, please visit uponor.com. Visit homefiresprinkler.org for the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition website, or Green Builder to see a replay of this webinar and learn about fire sprinkler installations. If you have any questions, I encourage you to please submit them via the question box, and Mike can forward those on to me. Thanks so much for your time, and appreciate you considering fire sprinklers to help save lives, save the planet, and improve your business.
Thank you so much, Eric. And like you said, if you've got questions, please go ahead and send those in via the questions box. I've got a couple for you, Eric, and we'll weave in some more questions as they come in from the audience. Had a question on rural homes and rural homes on wells. Thinking about my in-laws, they live in a very rural area. Neighbors, closest neighbor is a quarter mile or so away. Response time, obviously on a fire, can be well beyond the average. Are there any concerns about either sufficient water pressure or water supply when putting a residential fire sprinkler into those types of properties?
It certainly needs to be considered during the design of the fire sprinkler system. So one of the first things that a fire sprinkler designer will ask for is the water supply details. If this is new construction on a well, oftentimes the fire sprinkler designer, if included early enough, can help make recommendations for the size of the well and the pump, and the pressure that pump can provide. If it's an existing home, knowing what pressure and capacity for refill will certainly help that sprinkler designer with the type of system and the type of sprinklers that may be used. There are low flow sprinklers that are available for situations like this, and depending on how the piping is laid out and constructed, many times a fire sprinkler system can operate on relatively low pressures. The main thing that NFPA 13D will dictate is that there has to be at least 10 minutes of water available. Again, NFPA 13D is a standard that's aimed at getting the occupants out of the home. It's not a property protection standard. So as long as there's about 10 minutes, that there's 10 minutes of water supply available, that should give enough time for homeowners to escape the home. So if the well can recover and there's enough water stored in the well and the piping to provide 10 minutes of sprinkler operation, that should be enough to allow a system to be installed per NFPA 13D standard.
Gotcha. Okay. Another question I had was how difficult is it to put in a fire sprinkler system into an existing home? And the reason I asked the question is because you mentioned early in the presentation about how, look, this is in the code, but a lot of places amend it out. And so in a lot of instances, unfortunately, people aren't getting a home with a fire sprinkler put in. But on the resale market, somebody buys a home and they say, you know what, obviously in this area of the country I relocated and they don't require sprinklers in their code here, but I want them. Can you kind of talk us through that process a little bit?
Sure, it's a good question and one that comes up often. Depending on the type of construction or the type of home that you're living in, that can certainly have a big impact on how easy it is to retrofit a fire sprinkler system into a home. A ranch or single level with access to the attic, an unfinished attic, provides a pretty straightforward path to including fire sprinklers in that home. As I said, most fire sprinklers in residential occupancies use a flat concealed sprinkler in the ceiling. So if you have access to the attic and can install the piping there, it's fairly straightforward to retrofit sprinklers into that ceiling. On a two-story home, it's a little bit more challenging. Usually that top level of the home, you can have access into the attic again, but it's that main level where there's a bigger challenge on getting sprinklers installed. If there's going to be some renovation anyway in the home, there may be ways to approach using different sprinklers, for example, a sidewall sprinkler, where you can reach multiple rooms by only opening one wall, for example. Another way to do it is to incorporate soffits into a room and use sidewall sprinklers where the piping's actually hidden by a newly constructed soffit. So it's more challenging with an existing home, but there are ways to do it, and there are a lot of fire sprinkler installers that are out there that are very very creative, and it's definitely worth looking into. The amount of the peace of mind and the life safety provided by fire sprinklers makes a lot of people want to consider this, especially if they've got young kids or if they happen to have an older adult in the home with them, or to protect their pets that can't necessarily escape themselves, or that might need some assistance. The fire sprinkler system would certainly give them additional time, and so a little bit of extra work up front can certainly save a lot of heartache later.
Okay. We talked a lot in this webinar here about residential fires, and I wanted to ask you, since you are a firefighter, a slightly off-topic question. There have been a lot of people in California that have been affected by wildfires. What steps can homeowners take to protect themselves from an external threat?
One of the biggest things folks can do is to make sure that they're doing everything they can to keep the urban wildland interface clear of fire dangers. What that means is to really keep what can become very dry and potentially a very ripe fuel for wildland fires away from the home. There has been some exploration into external sprinklers as well. In fact, we just had a question for that come up not too long ago, looking at a home that's, again, as you mentioned, rural, quite a bit reduced, quite a bit away from fire department response, and looking at trying to keep some sort of fire protection on the outside of the home through fire sprinklers. That's not something that's covered by NFPA 13D, but it is an area that I know people are looking into and exploring. So the biggest thing is keep vegetation away from the home, keep it far enough away that if it becomes involved in a fire, it's not going to directly impact the exterior of the home. Using some different types of cladding materials on the outside of the home can also provide a big benefit. Vinyl siding's obviously very popular these days, but it's very flammable material, much like all the other plastics and synthetic materials that are inside our homes today. It melts and burns very quickly and at a lower temperature than some of the other materials. So there are definitely things to look at, and when making choices about those kinds of things, especially in new construction, new rural construction, or a remodel situation, looking at the fire resistance, the resistance to burning, and those burn characteristics of those materials certainly is worth consideration.
Okay. I wanted to put the last call out there to our audience to submit questions for Eric as it relates to fire sprinklers, fire safety. I've got one more for you, Eric, and this is to both Eric the firefighter, but also you might have seen this through your role as codes manager now at OpenR. Now you and I really have something in common. We focus on codes a lot. There is a piece of legislation that's currently sitting in the U.S. Senate called the CO Alerts Act of 2019. And it calls for each public housing agency to ensure that carbon monoxide alarms or detectors are installed in each dwelling unit in public housing. This legislation has passed the House, and for those who are legislative geeks, it was HB 1690. The companion legislation in the Senate is SB 2160. I was just going to ask you, Eric, whether you have your firefighter hat on or your proverbial codes manager hat on, do you have any thoughts on this proposed legislation?
It's a little bit early on for me to be aware of that one. Okay. So I'm not sure I can comment very intelligently. I do know that in terms of private homes here in Minnesota, all new construction or homes that are being sold, I believe, actually have to have carbon monoxide detectors installed on within 10 feet of every sleeping room, I think is the way that the code's written. I might be off on some of those specific details, but carbon monoxide certainly is a concerning issue and problem, especially as homes become more environmentally tight, more airtight. And if carbon monoxide does start to develop as a problem due to an appliance or from the furnace or something else, there really isn't as much air exchange potentially as in some older, draftier homes. And so our knowledge about carbon monoxide poisoning, how dangerous it can be, certainly has increased over the years. So I guess in general, I think carbon monoxide detectors or alarms certainly are important. But to the specifics of public housing or public sleeping rooms, I don't know enough about that yet to really comment.
No, that's fine, and I understand. Part of the reason why I was asking you was because you're a firefighter. You go in, and part of what you do is rescue people. Part of the reason I asked the question is for myself. I see it as a logical extension of the fire sprinkler code requirement. That look, we're putting some of these safety devices, requiring some of these safety devices because of life safety. And fire sprinklers have been put into the code. Now, this isn't so much a code, it's a legislative situation, but saying, hey, look, public housing, they've got to put these in. I think it's just a natural extension of a life safety thing that makes a lot of sense.
It does. And in most public areas, nowadays, fire sprinklers are, they're everywhere. They're in all office buildings, in all assembly areas, theaters, and everywhere the public can gather. In most hotel rooms nowadays. I mean, you're hard pressed to find a hotel room that doesn't have fire sprinklers and a smoke detector. And carbon monoxide is a logical extension, or a carbon monoxide detector is a logical extension there. There have been some instances recently where folks have succumbed to and become victims in carbon monoxide. So yeah, absolutely. I think from a public safety standpoint, it is one of those next steps, hopefully relatively easy to incorporate. And I think that's one of the big things that's always one of the big concerns is when we're looking at these, we're, in general, everybody's always thinking about what will it cost? And sometimes we have to look at it, I think, and say, well, what does it cost us if we don't do it?
Right. Right. That's a great point. That's a great point to end on. I don't see any other questions. So, Eric, I certainly want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. Any final thoughts?
No, just to really appreciate it and encourage folks again, if you've got additional questions, reach out to us at upanor-usa.com or look for some more information on your own, homefiresprinkler.org, the NFPA at the Green Builder Media website. Lots of information out there and available for you. Thanks very much.
I also want to thank Upanor for sponsoring today's webinar and to our audience for joining us. We really appreciate it. Hey, I need to let you know about our next webinar. It's only 1 week away on Wednesday, December 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So it's a little bit earlier than our normal start time. C.R. Hero, who is the VP of Innovation at Meritage Homes and internationally renowned architect and overall nice guy, Stace McGee, will be here to discuss the building science, sustainable design, and green building features of the Vision House Seattle Cascades. You know, today's webinar sponsor, Upanor, is also a sponsor of the Vision House. Now, Sarah Gutterman of Green Builder Media is going to be your host for that webinar. And so if you're going to the 2020 Sustainability Symposium next month in Las Vegas, I look forward to seeing you there. Green Builder Media asked me once again to be the public address announcer, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I'm also looking forward to meeting you if you're there. So make sure to stop by and say hi. And finally, since this will be my last webinar in 2019, I wanted to wish everyone a very happy holiday season and a safe, peaceful, and sustainable 2020. I'll see you next year, everyone. Goodbye.